On April 20th, 1952, Baba arrived in New York with 6 men and 6 women disciples of both Eastern and Western origins. They went directly to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where a property had been dedicated to Baba, and after a period of several weeks, Baba received many old and new followers, particularly on May 17, when a vast crowd congregated from all over the United States to see him. The group then set out by car for California and another projected series of interviews. While crossing Oklahoma, the car carrying Baba was struck, and 4 of the 5 occupants seriously injured in one of the heartbreaking incidents so common to our highways. In the nearby little town of Prague, Oklahoma, there existed by great good fortune a small private hospital operated by Dr. Burleson. The efforts of this man and his tiny staff, confronted with a mass of bloody flesh and stained clothing, in which were entangled a silent master and his injured companions, is certainly an epic in the constant drama of the medical world in its ceaseless battle to alleviate misery and prolong life. As the tangle of misery was gradually sorted out, it became clear that no one was in immediate danger, but the number of broken bones and the areas of skinless and abraded flesh were formidable. For days, the dull and dreary routine of setting, cleaning, bandaging, and pumping in of new life went on. Baba's broken leg and arm and severe contusions of the face were not the most severe of the injuries, but among the most painful. After 2 weeks, the party returned by ambulance to South Carolina and a period of recuperation. How could a great spiritual leader allow such an accident to happen to himself and his followers? Surely he could foresee and prevent it. I wonder how many times these questions have been asked. Actually, Baba had predicted as long ago as 1928 such an accident to himself and the necessity for it. He had even mentioned on occasion that it would be necessary to spill his blood in America. But such a declaration on my part of "he knew it all the time" falls wide of the central issue. The great spiritual leaders of the ages have never avoided the mishaps of a reckless and unheeding civilization. In fact, they have embraced their portion of human catastrophe and have lived it through without recourse to the arbitrary usage of the cosmic power at their fingertips. The supreme function of the spiritually great is not what they do outside the law of our physical world, but what they do within it. In 1937, asterisk, editor's note, at that time, Baba had as yet made no public statement regarding his avatarhood, and he was generally regarded as a perfect master, a Sadguru. However, in Supplement 30, Baba explains the difference between the roles of avatar and perfect master. So in 1937, Baba had explained this function of the perfect masters. Quote, "A perfect master who has to take upon himself the burdens of the world to absorb them must necessarily have physical reactions and consequently must suffer physically, like ordinary human beings. By submitting themselves to the law of action and reaction, the perfect masters establish that law and are selflessly and willingly subject to it. But in spite of subjecting themselves to this law, they stand above the law and could rid themselves from physical reactions. What then would be the meaning and purpose of action and reaction? Perfect masters absorb the dual effect of the universal illusion by taking humanity out of the illusion, through liberating mankind from the bonds of action and reaction. The perfect master absorbs duality in his true existence in order to sublimate it. End quote. After additional days of interviews with people in New York, Baba set out by air for a visit with followers old and new in Europe, returning to India in late August 1952. Almost at once, he set out on further journeys in that country to contact a few more mosques, but now his activities focalized more on giving spiritual blessing to the great masses who thronged to the locations announced for his public appearances. These mass darshans culminated in September 1954 when he called on his male followers throughout the world to congregate at his ashram in Ahmednagar for a, quote, last spiritual enclave. About 1,000 collected from the various corners of India and the far reaches of Asia, Europe, and America. Those who arrived early witnessed on September 12 the congregation of 60,000 souls from the countryside surrounding Ahmednagar to receive Baba's blessing in the form of prasad. Following this colorful and moving occasion each afternoon, Baba personally instructed the travelers. On September 29, Baba addressed the 1,000 who had collected at his call, blessed them, and sent them on their way. On October 7, he abandoned the use of even his alphabet board, depending now only on gestures for communication. It is interesting to note that the gestures Baba uses for communication are not the alphabetical ABCD, the formation of fingers a silent person is apt to make use of, nor a sign language as used by the deaf and dumb, but free and easy and somewhat exaggerated gestures, uniquely his own, that describe most vividly what he wishes to convey. Once again, Baba announced that the breaking of his silence, his manifestation, and his death were all near. Baba has said that when he breaks his silence, he will speak only one word, the word of words, which will penetrate the hearts of men. Thus, in collaboration with Murshid Adus, I have tried to bring up to date once again the eventful life of Avatar Meher Baba. It is left to history to sort out and weigh in the perspective of accumulating events the significance of his life and actions. We who participate in the immediacy of the now can only offer the measure of our love and human allegiance and declare our gratitude for the great thing that has come into our lives. Don E. Stevens. Introduction to second edition. In the 18 years that have passed since publication of the first edition of God Speaks, the flood tide of Meher Baba's presence has spread around the world, and his name has become a symbol of hope and faith to millions. At the end of January, 4 years ago, he himself dropped the body, which now lies interred in the tomb prepared many years ago, under his own careful instructions at Meherbad, near Ahmednagar, India. In this period, it has been possible to witness the impact of the universality of Meher Baba's approach to the problems of the world, and the uniformity of response of the peoples of all faiths and sects to his love. From the earliest days, Meher Baba had pointed out that he belonged to no particular religious group, rather that it was his objective to breathe vitality into the words of truth handed down in all the great world faiths. In repeated, clear, concise statements, he has underlined his independence of action and universality of approach. Quote, I have no connection with politics. All religions are equal to me, and all castes and creeds are dear to me. But though I appreciate all isms, religions, and political parties for the many good things that they seek to achieve, I do not and cannot belong to any of these isms, religions, or political parties, for the absolute truth, while equally including them, transcends all of them and leaves no room for separative divisions which are all equally false. The unity of all life is integral and indivisible. It remains unassailable and inviolable in spite of all conceivable ideological differences. Quote, I am equally approachable to one and all, big and small, to saints who rise and sinners who fall. Through all the various paths that give the divine call, I am approachable alike to saint whom I adore, and to sinner whom I am for. And equally, through Sufism, Vedantism, Christianity, or Zoroastrianism and Buddhism, and other isms of any kind, and also directly through no medium of isms at all. Asterisk. That was from the messages given out during the Fiery Free Life, 1952. The thorny subject of Meher Baba's avatarhood, Christ or Messiah status, has also clarified greatly in these intervening years. When the first edition of God Speaks was placed before the public in 1955, the fact of Baba's avataric function had been described to those other than his closest disciples for only a few years. Before that time, most people had regarded him as a great saint or a perfect master without guessing the further significance of his mission. In 1954, however, Baba stated clearly and for the first time publicly that he was the avatar of the age. Already having recognized him as a perfect master, the devotee had no problem making allowance for this extension of universal responsibility. To the outsider, intrigued by the caliber of Meher Baba, but lacking the opportunity to become absorbed into his being through personal surrender, it was still early to try to judge the external activities and results of the avataric role. Surprisingly, very few people took strong public difference with the statement that Baba was the avatar of the age. Many, through reading God Speaks itself, were convinced that such a work could come only from one who had attained to the highest spiritual status, and therefore it would be better to wait and observe before making any judgment. Oddly enough, of those who had not encountered Baba in the flesh, it was not the traditionally spiritually inclined who first began to accept him as the Ancient One. It was the young, the rebels, the experimentalists, questing for the clues to meaning in a life of confusion and frustration, who suddenly began to recognize the image and the words of this silent master. Their instincts, sharpened by need and stretched by repeated failures of approach, suddenly found the answer in a photo of Baba, a book of his discourses, a pithy statement about life printed on a small card. As Baba had so often stated in the decades preceding, the advent of the avatar and the acceptance of his word is precipitated by the needs of creation. When the need is great, the avatar comes, and his word is accepted because it is the only thing which can satisfy. Mankind's search for worthy and dependable goals has been growing for generations. In our day, it has become so insistent that it has lashed out in a wave after wave of social turbulence. Into this social ferment steps Meher Baba with a clear statement of the purpose of creation and an all-embracing love so powerful that the raw abrasions of need are soothed so abruptly as to lead to silence and tears of relief. Repeatedly, Baba describes creation as the vehicle by which God's impulse to know his own divinity consciously is brought to fruition. In careful statements in God Speaks, he describes the manner in which the mechanism for the generation of consciousness is developed, the reality of infinite unity and the consciousness evolved through resolving the infinite challenges posed within the duality of creation is traced in the most minute detail. The physical form that acts as the medium for experiencing the opposites of creation is shown to be an increasingly complex byproduct of this will of God to know himself consciously. The very force of evolution of form becomes not a random selection of the fittest, but a result of the necessity of the residues of experience to express themselves through increasingly more complex instruments. The evolution and perfecting of consciousness is itself described as the entire purpose of creation. And in regard to the evolutionary process, it is well to remember always that the beginning is a beginning in consciousness. The evolution is an evolution in consciousness. The end, if there be an end, is an end in consciousness. From the Awakener, Volume 8, Number 4, 1962. These, as well as the host of balanced, practical insights into daily life given out by Meher Baba over the decades, have been what the young have cried out for. They recognize Baba empirically for what he is, the answer to the dilemma of modern life. This is exactly what Baba had stated that the avatar must be. Thus the hand and the glove fit exactly. In looking at the match, one can have no doubt that Baba is precisely what he has said he is, the avatar of the age. But what about Meher Baba's more personal life during this period? Despite his long-predicted serious automobile accident near Prague, Oklahoma in 1952, and a later, even graver one near Satara in India in December 1956, in which his hip joint was smashed and Dr. Nilu killed outright. Nevertheless, the 15 years encompassed much intensive inner and outer work. With reference to these two accidents, one must keep in mind that it is a world of systematic balances in which we live, with none of the magic of the fairy wand. The avatar himself trues the balance by the very process of the suffering which he willingly undergoes. On these two occasions, he has spilled his blood on 2 continents for the sake of what he has known must be done. In 1956, he made a trip to Europe and America and on around the world, visiting Australia for the first time. This 12th visit to the West is amply chronicled in The Awakener, Volume 4, Number 1, and Volume 5, Number 2, and other works. His 13th trip to the West in 1958, including this time only Australia and America, produced an intense atmosphere of the reciprocal play of love between lovers and beloved. The Awakener, Volume 5, Numbers 3 and 4. On this occasion, it was clear that Baba was to be for those who knew the song of their own hearts. The public was not discouraged from seeking the presence of this intriguing being, but no publicity was given to the visit. It was a true living in the presence of the beloved. In retrospect, one understands that Baba knew that for many this would be the last personal contact. In fact, he stated as much, but we did not hear him. In 1962, Meher Baba again performed the magic of drawing the close ones to him, but in a significantly new pattern this time. In the past, there had been only the most limited mixing of his followers from the East and the West. In 1962, however, the mixing was deliberate and on a grand scale. Hundreds poured into Pune, India, the site of the meeting, from Europe, America, and Australia. Other thousands came from Iran, Pakistan, and India. The 1962 East-West gathering at the beautiful residence of Guru Prasad in Pune was an epic of the joining of streams of love from widely different natural springs of culture. For 5 days, Meher Baba sat with this closed, invitational group of some thousands and mixed together the elements of disparity within the solvent that produces the only true unity, supreme love. One wonders how this incredible being was able to draw from a body seriously hampered by long, hard use and crippling accidents the physical resource to greet and bless the multitude for long hours each day and well into the night. On the 6th day, he went even further. The gates of Guru Prasad were thrown open, and the masses were allowed to come before him for the coveted spiritual blessing. From sunup to sunset, the living stream passed before him, and when finally the gates were closed at dark, a long ribbon of humanity, four abreast, still stretched far into the distance, hoping against hope for the glance or the touch. From this time, with brief exceptions in 1963 and 1965 for his Indian devotees, Meher Baba went into increasingly restricted seclusion. Finally, in August 1966, he issued instructions that no one would be allowed to see him except at his own specific invitation. There were very, very few invitations given and even fewer exceptions made. He let all know that he was in the crowning phases of his universal work, and then finally that work had been achieved to his 100% satisfaction. This should have been the signal to his devoted followers, but one never conceives of the day when the beloved will not be physically at hand. On February 1, 1969, the news spread quickly around the world via the network of deep devotion that Meher Baba had dropped his body shortly after noon of the previous day. For 7 days, the shell lay garlanded and strewn with fragrant rose petals in the tomb, long prepared for the occasion, head propped up on a light pillow, so that quote, so that I may give my lovers darshan without having to rise, end quote. He had seen what would be necessary and, as always, had prepared for it. His devotees recognized, quote, the passing away of the infinite as infinite, in its own infinitude, end quote. The entombment was followed in April, May, and June by visits of large groups from the East and the West to Guru Prasad, to Meherzad, the residence, and to Meherbad, the tomb. We do not know how one can describe what happened. The only way it can be done is for you to sit down with one who is there. Francis Brabazon has related this great event most beautifully in a pamphlet entitled 3 Talks, published by Mayor House Publications, Sydney, Australia in 1969. In this revised edition of God Speaks, certain new points and corrections indicated by Meher Baba have been made. There are also some additions to the supplement. Various of the charts have received minor but necessary changes, and 5 more charts have been included. One chart was done as a labor of love by Ludwig Dimpfel and concerns mystic, Sufi, and Vedantic terms related to the planes of consciousness as used in God Speaks. This chart was sent to Meher Baba several years before he dropped the body. Erich B. Jisawala tells us that Baba went over it meticulously, making 2 or 3 corrections, and expressed complete satisfaction with it, approving its usage for God Speaks. It was so large it has been enclosed separately. Further footnotes have been added in the text from separate information Meher Baba gave from time to time. It should also be noted at this time that some terms used under headings denoting Sufi, Vedantic, and mystic terminology are in certain instances not classic terms employed in those 3 disciplines. Rather, are they terms employed to allow comparative study and better understanding of the theme by the reader. A complete glossary compiled by Ludwig Dimpfel was approved by Meher Baba before he dropped his body. In closing, we cannot avoid suggesting an inevitable corollary of the life and words of Meher Baba. While he lived for the inner man, that he might break through the shackles of the delusions of reality by which he had bound himself, still the clarifications given by Meher Baba have great import for the physical disciplines as well. As one reads the various works given out by, quote, the highest of the high of our times, the implications for all manner of physical sciences are seen to be basic and revolutionary. As those trained in the fields of physics, chemistry, geology, psychology, and many other disciplines study the life and statements of Meher Baba, they will quite rightfully apply them first to the needs of their own inner nature. However, as his words accomplish the first task of establishing a sense of vital purpose and assured support, a second phase of significance will inevitably begin to assert itself. Life begins to move, and it moves both internally and externally. The quick successive recognition of truths that bore inwards are followed by matching insights into the functioning of the external. The simple, almost self-evident statements of Meher Baba are seen to ramify into a kaleidoscope of fundamental and exciting implications. He was sparing of words. He did not elaborate. He laid down only a vital reinterpretation of basic truth. Out of that flows the multitude of inevitable conclusions. The physicist, once he has set the wheels in motion to rediscover his essential self, will also begin to discover the impact of Meher Baba on his own field of physics. Meher Baba is like that. He flows quietly through all aspects of life, and before one knows it, all of life has become nothing but the fascinating game of watching Meher Baba deal with Meher Baba. Certainly, this is the ultimate in universality. San Francisco, California, April 1973. Ivy O. Deuce, Don E. Stevens. That's the end of the introductions.